Well, there are three players that have on their CV that they are a Premiership player with St Kilda and a Brownlow medalist. One of them is Verdon Howell, one of them is Ian Stewart, and one of them is Ross Smith, who joins us now. 222 games with the club, also coached St Kilda in 1977, won the best and fairest twice, was captain for 3 years, captained Victoria, won a premiership as coach over in the West with Subiaco, and is in the Australian Football Hall of Fame, and of course a starring member of that 1966 premiership team, winning the Brownlow the year after in 67. Ross, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Darren.
Now, when you, I guess, hear those sorts of accolades, how often does it sort of come back into your mind, some of those moments, whether it's the grand final, whether it's the Brownlow, because it is a very, very impressive CV?
I guess it's the premiership which you remember most, because that's a team affair, and I've got some very good friends with whom I played. You mentioned Bob Murray, and I see him sort of at least annually. We had an annual game of golf with he and Jeff Moran. Both of us, the three of us, played in the grand final. We played with another St Kilda player, Paul Callery, and have a great day. But it's great to get together with those guys, and quite a number of us got together just before Christmas to go up and see Cowboy Neil up in Wodonga. And it was just good to get together, talk over old times, and we kicked further and took higher marks than we did previously. But no, it's just good to get together with that group of guys.
Ross, you're known as probably the best rover in the history of St Kilda Football Club, as says the St Kilda website. How does it make you feel? You averaged 25 disposals a game over the course of a season, in 2 seasons of your entire career. How does it make you feel watching, I guess, players now that are averaging, 35, 37, 40 touches a week?
Oh, look, I think it's just a part of the evolution of the game and the way in which the game is played, that the players go on and off the ground now. So I don't know whether I would have adapted to being taken off for a little while, but look, I think it's just the way in which the game is played, that there's more handballs, and there's a more sort of handball and then backing up for handball and so on. And I think within the space of 10 seconds, you've got 3 or 4 possessions.
So going back to the start of your career, sort of, where did you start with football? Did you start at a very early age? Did you pick it up like very early on? And then how did that progress? What did you go through to then end up at the club?
I was a bit of a late starter, because I had quite a number of activities in my youth, and I was a member of the Boy Scout group, which was a very active scout group, but I didn't play in football until I was 14 years of age. And my school teacher at the time said, oh, look, he was coaching the under-19 team, which played just up the road from the school. He said, oh, look, I'd like you to come up and have a game with us. And so I went up, played with the Hampton Scouts, as they were called then. They're now known as the Hampton Rovers, but Hampton Scouts at the time, and we went on to win the premiership in the under-19 competition. So I started as a 14-year-old and played until I was 18. I played for 4 years there. And that was my start. And then I went to St Kilda at the end of my secondary school. I went to St Kilda after, because I lived in St Kilda's area. I was zoned to St Kilda. I was an avid Essendon fan, and I'd go with my brother and sister to watch the Essendon each day, because I had an auntie and uncle who lived near the ground out there. And loved the football, but I was zoned to St Kilda. And it was probably a good thing, because at the time St Kilda was just starting its development as a team. Allan Jeans was in his first year as coach, and there was about 4 or 5 of us who were vying for roving positions. And I was fortunate enough I played 1 game in the seconds, and then I played in the seniors.
It's been an amazing journey. Your second game, or your first game, was Allan Jeans' second game as coach. We would lose that game to Essendon at Windy Hill, but you'd play in 6 wins in a row after that. We'd make the finals for the first time in 22 years. What was it like in that first year? You had a young coach that went on to be a legend of the club, and you had a lot of players that went on to be legends of the club. Did it feel like the group was going somewhere?
Yes, I think it was. I think that 61 was the start of the era. For the Jeans era, but I think it was sort of in 63 when I think it was when Bob Murray, Carl Dietrich, Baldock came in 62. So we were gradually developing a team that was going to feature in finals. and we played in the finals in 61. We played it again in 1963, but we then got into we were top of the ladder in 65, but we were knocked off by Essendon. They came up from 4th position to beat us in the grand final.
Ross, you played a lot of games during those first couple of years of your career, but you weren't known as I guess, a star of the team until that kind of 66, 67 period. What was it that kind of made the difference in your career, that kind of you went from being a regular to a star at that point?
Well, I don't agree with it being a star, but anyway, I think the change was that Allan Jeans gave two things. One is I think I matured and developed as a player and understood what was required to play the game. But then also in 1965, Allan Jeans gave me a different role. He gave me a more fulfilling role. He recognised that I had a certain level of fitness which would allow me to be a run-with player and to rove for the majority of the game. And so I would probably stay on the ball for 75, 80% of the game, but running with my opponents, who Allan's theory was that they would lead me to the ball. My fitness and strength would allow me, once I got there, to win the ball. And he was proven right. And I think in 1965, I was started that task. And then 66 developed it even more. And obviously in 67, I had one of my best years.
An understatement to say that you weren't a star and you won a Brownlow. just a little bit humble, maybe.
Oh, maybe. But look, I think the results speak for themselves. And if people want to put that status, that's fine. I'm happy to go along with that, particularly in my later years.
So you started basically the same time Jeans did as coach. You only played under him. How was you see coaches changing so often these days, and even back then they changed quite often. How was it playing under one coach for the entire career? Is it something you think that either it helped you with the consistency, or do you think maybe a change at some point could have made some sort of difference to yourself?
Well, we'll never know the latter, but I think what St Kilda had at the time was they had stability. And in the previous decade, they'd had a range of coaches and CEOs and presidents. And I think that the combination of Graham Huggins as the president, Ian Drake as the secretary, and Allan Jeans as the coach, I think they worked very well as a team. And there was certainly some consistency within the way in which the club was operated. And I think that gave us the stability. And they went out and I think they strategically looked for players and say the recruitment of people like Baldock, and then the recruitment of Ian Stewart, the local players like Carl Dietrich and Jimmy Reed and Jeff Moran and those other players complemented the recruiting strategy.
Can you take us through your memories of 66? And we obviously know how significant a day it was for us. And I guess reflecting on the whole era, under Allan Jeans, we made the finals 9 times, 5 preliminary finals, 3 grand finals. Is there a part of you that feels we should have won more than one in that era?
I think yes. That 65, I think we're probably the better team for the year, but Essendon were too good on that particular day and they had the momentum going up. I think 65 gave us the experience that allowed us to win in 66. That when we played in 65, the second semi-final, which we won to go into the grand final, that was only our third final. We played 61 in the first semi-final, similarly in 63, and then 65, we'd play the second semi, go straight to the grand final. So we're really relatively inexperienced in comparison to the Essendon players at that era, because they'd won in 62. And the majority of them had continued on and played in 65. So they knew what finals was all about. And we were, I suppose, in comparison, relative newcomers to finals experience. And I think it's very important to have that finals experience. So that gave us, I think, a little bit more strength and conviction to go into 66. We were stronger then. I think Jeans made a very strategic decision when he picked Bingley to play on Tuddy, who had kicked 7 goals in the second semi for us in that year, and then we curtailed some of their better players, and we were able to win that game.
Ross, there are a lot of stories, obviously, about the legend of that day, and so many great players, obviously, being the only team to have done it for us. But Daryl Baldock, tell us a little bit about Doc, the man and the player, and just how bad was his injury on the day of that grand final?
Well, I'm not really aware of the nature of his injury, but Baldock had an amazing influence on our team. And he was the focal point of our forward line, together with Cowboy Neal. Cowboy kicked 5 goals on that game, and he could have kicked about 7 or 8 had he kicked accurately. But Baldock was a focal point of our attack. He was a player who was only short in stature. He was probably no more than about 5'9", 5'10", but he was able to hold down that centre forward position or centre half forward position very well. And if the ball got on the ground, you knew that Baldock would keep the ball himself between his opponent and the ball and be able to win it on more occasions. He was just a courageous player. He just had superb skills on either side of his body. He was one of the few players in that era to be able to kick left and right foot, to handball left and right hand, etc. So that's what made him a little bit special. And as a person, he was a honest person. He was a person of integrity. He had a very strong work ethic out on the ground.
Yeah, thinking back to when you won the Brownlow, it was a very different thing back then compared to what we see these days. Presented on grand final day in front of the grand final crowd, and yourself and I think second and third just come up as well. There might have been a couple of other awards also given on the same day. We saw Stuart win at 65-66 when we did play in the game. 67 also we didn't play in the grand final. How do you think you may have gone if you had picked up one of those other 65 or 66 and then moving into the game afterwards? How do you think your preparation might have gone with that?
I think the preparation might have been pretty much the same, but the psychological pressure might have been a bit different. So, you've got to really compliment someone like Ian Stewart, who played unbelievably well in that grand final in '66. Here he was, won his second Brownlow medal, and he was one of our best players on the day. He just had an ability to produce when it was required. Yes, certainly in my day, the count of the Brownlow was on through the radio. And it certainly wasn't at Crown Casino as it is today. And the counties it was very more lacklustre then.
You had a series of great seasons after the Brownlow, but 1971 in particular, you and a lot of your teammates starred. I did ask my father, who watched you play a lot of football, if he could ask Ross any question, and he said, how did we lose 71? So I guess I put that question to you as to how we lost 71, but also, I guess the second part of that, in 72, you missed the prelim, and we had a lot of guys that were injured or banged up, but played really well against Carlton in that prelim and narrowly lost. So that was obviously a very good team as well.
Yes, well, 71 was probably a missed opportunity. We weren't able to capitalise on the lead we had at three-quarter time, and a guy called Bob Keddy seemed to just pull a few marks out of the air. He had hardly got a kick for the previous 3 quarters and just seemed to find the ball in that last quarter, unfortunately, and we frittered away one. And I think that was the one that, well, to be honest, the Hawthorn in that year we'd played Hawthorn twice. They beat us in the second semi-final, and then we played them again in the grand final. So in some ways, they probably, on the balance of probabilities, they're more likely to win. But we nearly pinched it. But we did very well to do as well as we did. And as far as the missing the prelim final in 72, unfortunately, I got a groin injury in the previous game, and I even had 2 weeks because it was a drawn game, and it gave me an extra week, but it wasn't sufficient to allow me to play. In fact, when I went to Perth to coach Subiaco, I went over there to do a postgraduate study. That was the driving force of me going to Perth, but I didn't know until probably January, February that I was going to be able to play over there, because it just took a while to recover from it.
should you have won the Brownlow in 71? You had a couple of teammates that might have pinched some votes from you in the end, but you had a pretty good year that year.
Yes, I did. In fact, I spoke to John McIntosh, who unfortunately passed away late last year. And it was only about a month before, and I rang him and had a chat to him. And I said, Macca, I said, I probably cost you a Brownlow and you cost me a Brownlow, because there was one round to go. McIntosh had 18, Stewart had 18, and Smith had 16. And I thought, well, look, if neither of them get one, I could get 3 and knock them both off. Well, the only one who got any votes was Stewie to get his. So that's why I said to Macca, I think I cost you a Brownlow. And it's a bit like the Melbourne players last year, that a number of them were playing so well and scored so well, but they probably, in many ways, they cut the options for each of them.
Now, one thing you were involved with as well was the move from Junction Oval to Moorabbin. So on a personal level, how did you find the transition from the one to the other? And we know they're quite different grounds. Not sure what year the local showers came in, but what was it like in the transition between the two?
Well, from a personal point of view, I was very happy, because Moorabbin was just up the road from where I lived in Hampton. And previously I had to go to the St Kilda Junction ground. I remember when I was first recruited, I didn't have a car at the time. I had to take the train and walk down to the Junction Oval. It was a bit difficult to get to. But moving from the Junction Oval to Moorabbin, I think was fairly easy, and the transition was good from the point of view that the club got us involved in embracing Moorabbin as a home ground. And for example, I spoke recently to some of the players about how it must have been about 20 of us, all lined up in a line, walking up and down the ground, picking up pebbles. So the ground was being top dressed. So they didn't, in those days, they didn't have the rolling out of the grass. They actually sowed the grass with seeds. And so we had, prior to the seeding of the ground, we went and picked up all the pebbles off the ground so that it made it a lot cleaner for the green. So anyway, by getting us involved as players in the activities, we became part and parcel of the transition to Moorabbin. And then when 55,000 people came to the first game, and we won it against Collingwood, that was really the start of us having some very good football. And we finished off in 65 as playing off in the grand final.
Now, you kind of touched on it, heading to Perth for a postgraduate degree and spending some time with Subiaco. So I guess that was the catalyst for the move. And then coming back in 75, was that just simply a case of being the end of that study period and you were able to come back and have another year? Yes.
And I was also offered an assistant coaching role to Allan Jeans, and I thought that was a good progression in I guess, my transition from playing to probably coaching. And there was an offer of when Allan was ready to step down that I would be given the coaching role. And then, fortunately or unfortunately, through the year we had a number of injuries, and Jeansy said to me one night, he said, "I think you're going to have to play, Smithy." So I played. I think it was halfway through the year I played, and well, actually I was out on the ground most of the time. But I was lecturing at a time, and the students were having a bit of fun, and they took a bet to see whether I'd get a Brownlow vote in that year. Well, I did, so I surprised myself.
Were there any wages or anything with the students?
No. That was their own bit of fun. Yeah.
What was so Darren mentioned the study period in WA and your time at Subi, but what was the reason behind the move? I mean, it seems like you probably could have kept going for another couple of years with the club first, but why then? Why in 73 did you make that move?
I got to the stage in my professional career. I remember football was only part-time, and so therefore our career was pretty important, and I felt that I needed higher qualifications to keep my job, and also to get promotion within the lecturing field. And so I was offered a postgraduate scholarship from the University of Western Australia to go over and study in education, in physical education. And so that was the opportunity for me to go there. And that was playing football was the means to the end of getting the higher degree. And so I studied full-time for 2 years and then came back at the end of it after having successfully completed a Master of Education degree.
So you captained the club 70 to 72, but in 72 you also captained the state. How was the feeling of basically being told, okay, you're leading your state once we go into battle against all the other states, when I'm assuming it was the carnivals that year, and just the honour of being pretty much picked as the #1 player in the state to lead your team?
I don't know about being the #1 player, but I was certainly honoured to be elected captain. And also, you've got to note that Allan Jeans was the coach at the time. And I think that Allan wanted somebody who would, I guess, epitomise the things that he was trying to sell to the team. And we had a very good working relationship as captain and coach at St Kilda over a long period of time. I had great respect for Allan, and I think he was keen for me to be captain. And I was one of, I think, 3 St Kilda players who were in the team. Travis Payes, Barry Lawrence were also in the team as well.
The final one from me, I guess, a two-parter. Your relationship with Allan Jeans has been well documented. It's often been suggested that you might have been a favourite son, or one of the coach's very favourites due to your coachability, if you will. But when you then took on the role coaching in 77, did you base a lot of that off what Allan had sort of brought to the table? And did you ever cop a spray from him during your career?
Well, I don't know if I copped a spray. But every now and again there might have been a comment made. But I think he's also very good at congratulating. I can remember one day I was chasing somebody. It was in a final, and I put him under a little bit of pressure, and it stopped him from kicking a goal, and he sort of pulled him out. And Jeans made a point of saying, well chased. So I think that he had a good balance of criticising as well as giving a positive reinforcement. And I've forgotten the first part of the question.
Your coaching philosophy, obviously going into 77. Yeah.
In some ways, I found it difficult to coach after Allan because if I was critical of some of the things that we've done, I felt as though I was criticising Allan, and I found that difficult to cope with. So I had to sort of, I guess, choose my words carefully, or choose the way in which I sort of expressed them, so that it wasn't reflecting on Allan. And remember that Allan was in the background. He was at the club, but he was in the background, and I didn't want to be seen to be criticising Allan, or for the press to find that I had said something which was contrary to what Allan had, or Allan's philosophy. But in the main, we had similar philosophies. We had different ways of going about it. Allan was a bit more volatile than I was. I'm a more quieter approach. And more studious approach.
Ross, last one from me, but going back to that day in 1966, where on the ground were you when Barry Breen's wobbly punt wobbled through the point post, and also when Bob Murray took that mark at the end of the game? But what are your overarching memories of those final minutes or seconds? And when was there a moment before the siren went that you actually thought, we've got this?
No, because it was still in flux, I guess, because actually I just happened to see it the other night on television, and I remember being behind Breeny when he kicked the goal, because there was a ball up, and he grabbed the ball and kicked it. So I was around there and saw that it went through, and then there was the ball was kicked out, and it was kicked out to Tuddy, and there was nobody seemed to go over to Tuddy, so I had to start running for him, and so I was round about at centre half forward when Bob Murray marked the ball. So I was round about there, and then he kicked it out to Alan Morrow, who marked it just as the siren sounded. So the thing that I can remember most was the actual sound of the crowd. You know, when the scores became level, I have never heard a louder sound than I did on that particular occasion when the scores became level, and then once again when we got the behind. It was just an unbelievable sound that the sound was reverberating in and out of the stadium. It was like it was bouncing off the stadium. It was ricocheting around the stadium, and that's my great recollection from that occasion.
And yeah, finally, the honours that have come after your career. You've been named in the Hall of Fame, St Kilda Team of the Century. How do those sort of things sit against winning a premiership, winning the Brownlow? Are they right up there with that, in the same sort of category?
Yes, I think it's recognition, I guess, that you have received. And what I like about going to the Hall of Fame function is that they're generally only the Hall of Fame members who go there, and there's a genuine respect for one another from your players of the era. Unfortunately, I generally sit with someone like a Peter Bedford and players in my era, and there was a genuine respect for one another and for what you've achieved. So that's good. But ultimately, what we play for is to win a grand final. And fortunately, I'm one of 20 players at St Kilda who have got that premiership medallion. And that's what we strive for. That's what the guys today are striving for.
Ross, we long for the day when you get that company. It's undeniable to say you're one of the greatest players that ever played for the club. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate all you did. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.